to begin by acknowledging that there is a place within each of us that is unharmed and unharmable. There is an essential self, that spirit self, that God essence, the God mind that we talked about, that Robert read from the reading, that is eternal, changeless, whole and perfect in every way. From that place, or in that place, there is never a need for forgiveness. I'm going to say that one more time. Breathe into that. I felt something in the room there. So from that place, there is never a need for forgiveness. Because what have we been taught about forgiveness? We've been taught that someone has harmed me, or I have harmed you, and I need forgiveness. I need to forgive you. I need to forgive me. And perhaps there's a little different way of looking at this. And that way is, what happens when I really know the truth of who and what I am? And I really know the truth of who and what you are. And from that place, we simply reside in that knowing together. And we move away from the concept or the idea that anyone needs forgiveness. So perhaps it's more a remembrance of who and what we are. Returning to that place of wholeness. And I wanted to start with that because when we move into the conversation of forgiveness, we might have a lot of old programming around what it means. What have we been taught? And again, I'm going back to the reading. So many of us have been taught that only God can forgive. And along with that, we get taught that God is up there and out there somewhere. And we also get taught that he's this old guy, right? And like we need to somehow grovel for forgiveness. At that level of consciousness, as we've been talking about for the last few weeks, forgiveness in my world is almost impossible. Because I'm still holding on to the belief of right and wrong. I'm still holding on to, I need you to apologize to me because I can't move on otherwise. Now, how's that working? Not so great, right? Because sometimes they do come and apologize, and then what? And then it's like, wait a minute, I don't feel that much different. Because I still haven't released the belief that they harmed me. Well, I know she said sorry, but is she really sorry? Or I know he said, I was wrong for doing that to you, and I'm using that consciously, because when I'm in that place, I'm in that victim consciousness that things have happened to me. It doesn't remove the story. I look at like when we have someone that has committed a crime and we hear the family needs to make peace, so somehow they need to pay for the crime. But does that really help? Right? Does that really bring peace? You know, harming another person in order to make right the harm that was caused to me. That's the world of duality. And that's the world consciousness that has been prevalent for how many of thousands of years. And so we are moving into, and in this room, I'm going to say that we have fully moved into a new way of being and of seeing, and that is simply a recognition of who and what we are. And I'm going to keep going back to that phrase, a recognition of who and what we are. A recognition of who and what you are. I remember, I know Reverend Michael loves to say this, if I could just get people to stop blaming their parents. That's it, right? Because I was holding that belief. My dad didn't do this, and my mom didn't do this, and this didn't happen. And those stories kept me feeling trapped because those stories created my structure of knowing, my structure of my way of being, my way of seeing the world. And it wasn't really possible for me to move beyond that until I made the decision to forgive. Now, what it looked like for me at that time was it was really important for me to be in the story. And I really appreciate that Reverend Verona started this month speaking about forgiveness, and she acknowledged and honored that it is okay to tell the story. But as I said last week, how long are you going to tell that story, right? So around here, it's like, you know what, I'm going to give you about 2 minutes to tell that story. And then we're going to invite ourselves and each other to move beyond that story. Because that's the place of freedom. That's the place of peace. That peace that we might be looking for in a belief system that says, once you apologize, I'm going to be at peace. Not so. Once I absolutely recognize that it really, are you ready? You're going to take a breath on this one. Really, you came up against my story.
Yes.
Right? Came up against my story, so I say you've hurt me. I want to be clear. I want to be really clear here. I'm not talking about a spiritual bypass. I'm not talking, and what do you mean by spiritual bypass? Reverend Joan and I talk about this a lot because it's important. We're not saying, that never hurt me, I'm going to pretend like that didn't happen. I'm all love and light. That's why we get to tell the story, because we get to honor the story and the feelings and the emotions that came with it, and we get to move through that. Move through that, not around that, above it, or below it, or pretend like it's not there. But ultimately, when I believe I've been harmed, it's because something came up against my BS belief system. Right? My story. You can't do that to me because. So what are some of our stories? That's a beautiful story, right? Because actually, because we know that there's one mind, that's all we really need to hear today. That's all we really need to hear, because you know what she is? Pre-programmed human. Yes. Now, I love her parents. I love you both very, very much. I have the honor of marrying them. Very, very near and dear to me. And no matter what, so if you're a parent, talk about forgive them. We're going to do a little forgiveness right now. Who's a parent in this room? I forgive me. Say it.
I forgive me.
For those times that I forgot. The preciousness of my child.
The preciousness of my child.
The preciousness of myself.
The preciousness of
I forgot they were God and Goddess.
I forgot they were God and Goddess.
I was operating out of my programming.
I was operating out of my program.
I forgive me.
I forgive me.
Right? Because she's demonstrating the deepest truth. She's just in that moment. But that beautiful voice, that laughter, that in the moment presence that I am. Our children come into this world to teach us, to remind us of who and what we are. We talked a little bit about this last week, but I'm called to move a little bit more deeply into it. We also carry the generational shame of our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents. I'm really aware in my own life that a lot of people have made their transition this week.
Yes.
And I don't know if it's that more people make their transition, or we just have more social media now, more awareness, or there's just more humans on the planet.
Yes.
But I, in my own life, two of my friends made a transition last week. I went to Memorial yesterday. We know John McCain. And there's multiple people. Paul Simon, I believe, this morning.
No.
I think that's true. Neil Simon, oh my God, I'm sorry. Paul, if you're watching, I'm sorry. Neil Simon. I was like, no. How was that for a moment?
Neil Simon and Neil Diamond.
Not Neil
Simon.
Neil Simon, who wrote The Odd Couple.
The playwright.
Okay, the playwright. Okay, so we'll take a moment with that. Wow, so what did you experience in that moment? There's information there. So what did you experience in that moment? Some information there. And so I'm not going to actually talk much longer. I want to invite you in this moment to think about and to be with the time that you knew who and what you were or are. Maybe it's a time when you go back to early childhood. For myself, for me, pre-5, I remember being very, very joy-filled, very, very connected with myself and others, spending what felt like an eternity in the backyard, mesmerized by life. That's who and what we really are. And when we have the privilege of remembering that for ourselves and for another, for our parents, for the programming. I remember my mother, she watches a lot, so I love you, Mom. she remembered a time when she was becoming aware that I was really sensitive. And let's just break it down here. Back in my era, sensitive and male did not go well together. So she had some programming around that, and she wanted to protect me from the world. So she thought the best way to do that would be maybe to toughen me up a little. And I don't mean that she toughened me up or roughed me up a little, but there was something there because of the time and space that she was born and raised. She had a belief system about what a boy should be. And I was looking not quite like that mold or that picture. And so very well-meaning, and we've had some deep, deep, deep healing in our relationship. She remembers a time when she thought the best thing for her to do would be to pull her love away, to let my dad step in and be a male influence. What happened was Dad wasn't there. Mom pulled away, bless you. And I built a wall around my heart. And I started creating some really deep core beliefs about who and what I am. There must be something wrong with me. I must be unlovable. Why did I feel love before and I no longer feel that? Now, to a 7-year-old and a 6-year-old mind, I didn't have the cognitive ability to understand what was happening. I just shut down. And that shutting down really did help me for many, many years. It protected me from some of the pain that was around me. It also protected me from the love that was always available for me, but I was no longer able to access it because of that wall that I had built. And so we come into this teaching, we come into spiritual awareness, we come into a place and a space where we begin to recognize that the world is not happening to us. That what happened was I made some decisions about myself and the world that I concretized. Allison loves that word. Patty loves that word. Concretized it into my unconscious. And here's the thing. Basic metaphysical teaching. If I plant a maple seed, what grows?
A maple.
Do I plant a maple seed and hope to get an elm tree? So if I have deeply planted the seed of I'm not lovable, what grows?
You won't be lovable.
I'm an unlovable tree. And then I spent all these years trying to trim the tree and prune the tree and make the tree look a certain way. And I swear this isn't an I'm not lovable tree because for whatever reason it was a little bit scary for me to get down and look at the seed that I had planted. That deep core belief of unlovability. And because of that, I had developed all sorts of strategies to, one, prove that wasn't true to you and to me. But of course, if I'm holding the vibration of I'm not lovable, no relationship will ever fix that. Right? That's why we have the conversation in our culture that we keep attracting unavailable people. Well, no one gets to do that for me. They're not available for that. If I expect my husband to work on my deep wounds, what does all of this have to do with forgiveness? Forgiveness, as I said, is simply a returning to that place before those belief systems got created, before the programming. See, we're not broken. We don't need anyone to fix us. We are whole and perfect spiritual beings, and sometimes we remember that. And we remember that more and more and more when we come together in intentional, authentic community, spend time in the silence so we recognize that we have a human mind, but we're not our human mind. In other words, I have the stories of right and wrong, but they're not who I am. They do not define me. And when I know they do not define me, I actually don't need them to be any different. I don't need the story to change. I don't need anyone to apologize. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go a little deeper here. Some of the most traumatic experiences in my life broke me open in a beautiful and profound way.
Yes.
And I'm not saying, to be clear, I'm not saying oh, I was sexually abused, so thank you. I don't have any feelings around that. What I want to acknowledge is sometimes those deep and difficult experiences actually crack us open in a new way so that we can remember who and what we are.
Yes.
And so who am I to decide how it's supposed to get delivered?
Yes.
And as soon as I go into a story of right and wrong, I start rejecting something that might be my most transformative experience. Because we are here for transformation. We just finished our class based on Reverend Michael's book, Spiritual Liberation, and we focused a lot on the difference between change and transformation. Transformation is moving into that story, allowing ourselves to move through it, and to recognize that at a very deep level, we're none of that. I'm not my thoughts. And I will really close with this and turn it over to Reverend Joan. I love this. Albert Einstein says, intuition is a sacred gift, and the mind is a trusted servant. We live in a culture who has celebrated the servant, but forgotten the gift. And so that is what we're talking about here. It parallels with forgiveness in this way. When I remember the gift and I accept the gift of the God being that I am, when we come together in community in this way to celebrate the God being that each of us are, we allow the mind to be a servant to that. Many of us have been taught that it's the other way around. It doesn't mean the mind is not useful and powerful. Thank you, mind. Thank you, intellect. It is powerful. It is creative. It's amazing. It's when it's creating from the old story that we get more of the old story.
That's right.
So what seed are you planting? What seed is deeply planted in your unconscious? I forgive myself for planting the seed of unlovable. Now there's a new seed, and that seed is, I am whole and perfect in every way. I'm a perfect expression of the one power, one presence, just like every one of us here is, and every being on the planet. And with that, we move into and reside in a place where we wouldn't even have a conversation about forgiveness. Not even a conversation, because it's a knowingness of beingness. We get to simply be present with who and what we are for each other, as each other, and with each other. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the wonderful, deep, mystical, amazing spiritual teacher, Reverend Dr. Joan Steadman.
Let's take a breath. Thank you, Reverend TJ. I'm sitting there with every word you're saying. I'm thinking, what am I going to say? Is this on? I'm sorry about this, but here we have a transparent moment. Thank you. Now I'm on.
You're always on.
Even more, we've talked about with the new mics, it's a little more challenging because
Yes.
we actually have to see a light, and it's kind of hard to do that. Anyway, see the light. See the light. Thank you, Reverend TJ. So beautiful. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh, my goodness. So, what's coming to me right now is that there's only one person to forgive, but there's only one being. There's only one life. I'm reminded that Gary Simmons, in his book, The Eye of the Storm, and I being the letter I, not E-Y-E, the eye of the storm, that he says, because we are one, no one or no thing can ever be against us. Can ever, ever, ever be against us. There's only the oneness. There's only the allness. And as Reverend TJ so beautifully said, when we're living from that place, we're living in a place of, I can't even really be offended because there's nothing that works against me. Can we get to that place of nobody offends me? Nothing offends me. And I'm not there all the time. Let's just be real clear. Increasingly, yes, but not all the time. I have moments. And actually, those moments are wonderful moments. Even those are not against me because they remind me, oh, okay, I've got a little bit deeper work to do here. Oh, I have to go deeper. I have to look at what's really happening here. Why am I being triggered here? Actually, I always say don't ask the question why. So I just didn't follow my own rule. So I would ask instead of why am I being triggered, what wants to emerge here? What wants to emerge? What wants to happen here? because if I'm feeling this, and again, it's not about spiritual bypass, and I don't want to belabor this because we've probably all been talking about this for a month now, but we always want to be really clear that we want to look at what we're feeling. We want to be with what we're feeling, because our feelings are so precious and so powerful, and they're our teachers. We were given feelings for a reason. And so we never want to bypass. We want to be able to sit with them, to breathe with them, to feel them, and then to look at what's wanting to happen. What's the intention I want to set now? So I want to tell you a story. And then maybe I'll get back to know the only person is to forgive. But it just keeps changing in the moment. So the story is this, and some of you who used to go to OCSL might remember this story. The story is this. It was when Nelson Mandela got out of prison, and he started the reconciliation movement in South Africa. And so they had this one meeting they were having, and it was about this woman, older woman, probably about my age, older woman. Now that I'm thinking about it, I always think of her as this older person. However, anyway, this woman and her son, her husband had been killed, and her son had been burnt to death in front of her. And the policeman was a Mr. Van Brock. He was a police officer, and he was there, and she was there. And they were being asked to have some kind of reconciliation. So what happened, I'm going to make a long story very short. What happened was that she said, Mr. Van Brock, I want to come up and hug you. I forgive you, and I love you. Now this is a man who killed her husband and her son. And so she went up to him, and the story goes like this. There's several versions, but the main story goes like this. She went up to hug him, and he basically passed out. He was so stunned and so surprised by this. And he came to, and she hugged him, and then she said to him, I've lost my only son. I don't have a son anymore. She said, I want you to be my son. Wow. Got this. I want you to be my son. I want you to come once a week to the ghetto, to be with me, to chat with me, to be my son, to let me love you. To let me love you. Can you imagine this? And at that point, the story goes, and I guess this isn't validated, but the story goes that everybody in the room started singing Amazing Grace. The power, the basic story is true. Whether all the embellishments are true or not doesn't even matter. The reality is that her heart was so open. She was such a place of love that she could see him not as the other, but as someone precious to her. Last time, when I spoke a couple of weeks ago, I mentioned Dr. Howard Thurman's reading about Keep Open the Door of My Heart. And he talks about let your heart be a swinging door, never shut. And so the way I look at that, the more I've contemplated that over the years, is whenever it wants to close, I need to open it, keep opening it. Doesn't mean it'll never close again. We're all human. We have this human experience. Basically, yes, we're divine, basically. And we've come to this earth plane to keep remembering it. To keep remembering it over and over and over again. So I need to constantly be opening the door of my heart. And so that's why I'm saying, really, when it comes to forgiveness, it's all about me. It's all about you. It's all about each one of us. It's all about, can I see beyond the grievance? Can I see this person as another dimension of myself? Because we're all dimensions of each other. Can I see everybody as a dimension of myself? And can I keep open the door of my heart even when perhaps I've been abused in some way, shape, or form? Even when somebody cuts me out of their life? Even when somebody says nasty and critical things about me? Even when somebody fires me and I know I've done a good job? You know, all of these, whatever it is. Even when my partner has an affair on me. You know, whatever it is. Can I have such a place of openness? Can I have such a place of oneness that I see that person or that situation as my transformation? As Reverend TJ was saying, as an opportunity to transform. And I would go even a little bit step farther than that, saying it's an opportunity to transmute the old energy of unforgiveness into a brand new energy, into the energy of unconditional love, into the energy of compassion. There's a spiritual practice, I know some of you in this room know it, the practice of Ho'oponopono. How many of you in this room know that? Now, here's the thing. There are different ways I've seen people practice this. So I'm going to tell you the way that Dr. Hugh Lin, who is the person who really brought it to the forefront in recent years over in Hawaii, how people were healed. They had to close down a whole mental psychiatric ward of a criminal hospital because these people were healed by his consciousness.
Wow.
Because what he did was he took 100% responsibility for everything everybody had done in that hospital. He looked at the files. He never met with the criminals. Isn't that interesting? He looked at their files and he said, where is this in me? Where is this in me? And went about healing that place in himself. Where is the murderer in me? And maybe I didn't go out and kill somebody, but have I murdered in any way, shape, or form? Where is the thief in me? Have I stolen in any way, shape, or form? You know, it was interesting. Several years ago, I was at a gathering for Center for Spiritual Living, and my good friend Reverend Stephanie Clark was doing a workshop on the shadow side. And she had us each take a quality, a negative, what we would perceive as a negative quality, and say, where is that in me? Right? And I remember I got a thief. I'm like, my first response was, I've never stolen anything from anybody. But then I got to look at it more deeply. Have I ever stolen anybody's self-respect? You see? Have I ever stolen the place of goodness that I held them in my mind? Have I stolen that? Have I taken that away? This is deep work, as Reverend TJ was saying. This is really deep work that we do. So in Ho'oponopono, the practice as I've seen it by Dr. Hugh Lin is there are these 4 things we say. And again, I've seen everybody do it in every possible way, shape, and form. He begins with, I love you. And he begins with looking at the shadow side of ourselves. At looking at, if I'm upset with you because you've done something to me, where is that in me? So I get to go, I love you. I really love you. Rather than you're terrible, you're awful, go away. I'm going to try to fix you. I'm going to try to get rid of you. You see the difference? We open up a spaciousness and say, I love you. And then we say, I'm sorry. And what the I'm sorry is, I'm sorry I haven't paid more attention to you over the years. I'm sorry I've let you fester and grow and be this uncomfortable thing in me. I'm sorry. And then please forgive me. And then thank you. It's a much different. You can go online and find it, Dr. Hugh Lin, Ho'oponopono, and find the way he does it. It's not about forgiving the other person. It's about looking at that place in myself. Looking at that place in myself and forgiving myself, knowing that because we're one, the other person's also involved in this. But it's really about me. If I take offense to anything or anyone, it's about me. As I've often, very self-centered, as I've often said, many, many times I've quoted Dr. Kathy Hearn, you may have pushed my button, but you didn't install it. Yeah. Got it? And you didn't keep it alive and well. Some of us have kept our buttons very alive and very well, justifying our stories over and over and over again. I had, this week was very interesting, wasn't it? I mean, those of you who are politically savvy and stuff. I was on vacation, but my roommate and I kind of had to watch TV too. And it was an opportunity, to look at where do I judge, where do I condemn, because it was an interesting week. And then when John McCain passed, I was really surprised at how it touched me. And I probably agreed with very little of what he said politically, but it touched me. Because he was a man of integrity. He was a man who looked at what happened to him in Vietnam and said, I just heard this morning, and he said, what it brought me was a greater love for my country. Not how horrible and how damaged I am. Do you see? It's a difference in perspective. It's a difference in perspective. So I have a practice for you this week. There's a whole lot more I could say. I could go on and on and on. And I want to give you a practice before I forget. Whoops. I got too close to the other mic. What's the message in that? Anyway. So here's the practice. Take somebody in your life that aggravates you, that maybe you find a need to forgive in some way. And I encourage you to take a person that it's reasonable that you do this with, by the way. I'm not, sometimes it's just too big a task. So start with something that you can reasonably achieve this. And what I want you to do is, if you have an altar at home, put their name on your altar. If not, just keep this person in your prayers. Do that. Practice this. But here's the deal. As you're keeping this person in your prayers, knowing the highest truth for him or her, the bigger practice is, where is that in me? And then pray for yourself. You got it? How many of you are willing to do this? Thank you. And if you aren't, that's good, because we want to acknowledge when we aren't. And there's nothing wrong with that. We want to acknowledge when we aren't. So here's the practice. Take somebody in your life. And if nobody aggravates you, take a closer look. It might be yourself. It might be yourself. Oftentimes it's myself. When you were talking about with our children, oh my goodness, my children have been my teachers. One of them in particular. And it's just been continual work with myself, not fixing them. So practice that. Practice that. And the last thing I want to say is, when we're practicing forgiveness, it also helps to take little things. To start, because when the big thing comes, you'll be ready. You know what I'm saying? Right. It's like our daily prayer practice. Then when the big thing comes, we'll be ready. For example, have you ever been in line in the grocery store that's the express line? And the person in front of you, instead of having 12 objects, has like 20 or 25? Right. Yeah. And I don't know about you, but sometimes my mind can go into judgment about that if I'm in a hurry particularly. And that's a great opportunity to practice. You may think, well, that's not a thing to forgive, but really? I mean, it might be. Just let go of the little stuff, moment by moment. This morning, somebody cut me off on the road. I got, okay, I get to practice that. I get to just let go. Because there's a little part in me that gets very territorial about my place on the road. And so I get to, okay. Do you hear what I'm saying? Yes. So the practice with somebody that irritates you, that has upset you maybe in the past, whatever. Pray for them. And most of all, look at where is that in me, and pray for yourself. Knowing the truth about you is that you are the oneness of the divine. You are spirit in the flesh. You are the very presence of God. You are the quantum field of infinite possibilities. You're all of this, and you're more than this. More than this. So every prayer is a remembering, just a remembering of who and what we are.